Henry Nouwen has had a lot to say about compassion. And back in the 60s, he wrote a book with these two other authors. I still think it's one of the best things that's written about compassion. He asks the question, is it enough to live a life in which we hurt one another as little as possible? That's a fairly low expectation of ourselves. He also goes on to say that there is such an enormous hunger for the meaning in life, for comfort and consolation, for forgiveness and reconciliation, for restoration and healing, that anyone who has any authority in the church should constantly be reminded that the best word to characterize religious authority is compassion. So what's collaboration doing here? Well, I think that in this diocese you have a very strong commitment, intentional commitment to collaboration. And I do believe that good management of conflict and collaborative relationships are mutually exclusive. You really cannot have one without the other. Collaborative relationships will support healthy environments. In contrast, I think, to the toxic effects of unmanaged and unresolved conflicted relationships. And collaboration implies that the needs of the many at times will outweigh the needs of the few and the needs of the one. And it does require, I think, an enormous capacity to de-centre ourselves at times from our own agendas and our own desires, and to incorporate those of others. And I think that this is the essence, if you like, of being able to enter into conflict situations from that different gospel perspective, because that whole sense of emptying ourselves is a very compelling place from which to enter into conflict situations well and healthily. Emptying ourselves not of our strong centre. It's paradoxical in a sense that we can stand in a strong personal place and also de-centre, make the other the focus. And this is the focus, I think, which Henry Nouwen and his co-writers take when they are talking about compassion, that whole capacity to de-centre, to empty ourselves and make the other the focus rather than ourselves, which is not to not take ourselves into consideration. We do need to do that as well. We need compassion also for ourselves. So compassion, it requires the inner disposition to go to the places where other people are lonely and weak and broken, and to enter into solidarity with those who suffer. And the paradox often is that it requires actually quite a strong sense of self and self-esteem to be able to do that. So let's have a look at this inner landscape. Looking at conflict from the inside out. You know, we need right from the beginning, don't we, to be able to build good relationships with people if we're going to get on in the world. And we begin that, as I was watching TV last night and saw that ad of that baby crying. So it was quite upsetting in a sense to listen to that child crying and the young man, the young father, trying to decide what to do about that. And ultimately, to the relief, I think, of everybody, he picks the baby up and holds the baby. And so initially, the child makes known its needs by crying and sometimes distressing the caregiver. Also, the child learns to smile. And it actually acts in a way that is likely to bring what it is that the child needs. So right from the beginning, we do that. We learn how to relate, how to build relationships. And if we're loved well enough, it doesn't have to be perfect, but if we are loved well enough, we learn also how to do that well enough. We can learn skills, and we shall talk about those later today. And we can, in some ways, they're a bit like recipes. We take those skills and we gradually learn them and gradually make them our own. But there is something called disposition, attitude, intention, commitment. In other words, the interior landscape, without which those skills can be hollow and actually even manipulative. Those of us who know a lot about how to relate can also use those skills to manipulate other people who perhaps have less power and less knowledge of those than ourselves. So our own inner disposition is very important.